I guess, we have a lot of strong personalities in our caucus, as I think is well evident. And along with that become, very hardline positions taken from many. And, you could include me in that as well. But
Okay, political turmoil in New Brunswick continues as another member of Premier Blaine Higgs' cabinet has resigned over the controversial changes to LGBTQ+ policy in schools. Policy 713 aims to dictate when a student is allowed to change their name or pronoun without parental consent. The CBC's Jacques Poitras is in Fredericton. So Jacques, I've been trying to stay up to date on this, but it is moving fast. So bring us up to date on the fallout from this resignation that happened yesterday.
Well, Dorothy Shephard resigned after a vote in the House. The government has revised a policy on LGBTQ+ students in the province's schools. The minister says teachers will no longer be able to respect the pronouns of kids in class under the age of 16 without notifying their parents. This has caused a huge controversy. So what the Liberal opposition did was they introduced a motion and it called for further consultation on this by the province's child and youth advocate. Yesterday, 6 PC ministers and MLAs backbenchers, so 4 ministers, 2 backbenchers, voted for that motion. It has no real effect on the policy, but it was really quite a rebuke to the Premier and his government. Dorothy Shephard was among the MLAs who voted with the opposition. She then handed the Premier a resignation letter. She says this has been coming for a long time. She says she's been struggling with whether to stay in cabinet since October of 2021 because of the Premier's top-down management style. She says he doesn't listen to his caucus, he doesn't listen to his cabinet. There is no process for ministers to make decisions. So she is gone, and today at the legislature, everyone was talking about this. Other ministers were kind of sullen. There was a mood of anticipation. Everyone was talking about what will happen next. What will happen to the other 3 ministers? Where does this go from here?
Okay, so how did it get to this point? I know there's the controversy over a policy 713, which is on the LGBTQ+ community that you're talking about. And I know Dorothy Shephard had specific grievances with Blaine Higgs' management style. Is that the totality of what brought us to here?
Not at all. I mean, we just went through a very tumultuous debate on French immersion here. The Premier wanted to replace French immersion with a different program that had less French instruction. In Canada's only bilingual province, there was a lot of discomfort in caucus with that. It was seen as a surefire election loser. They eventually withdrew that, but this is the kind of thing that Shephard and others have been talking about for a couple of years, that Blaine Higgs gets something in his head, he wants to do it, and the normal governance process just goes out the window. And so that's what led us here today. Dorothy Shephard says she wrote a 6-page letter to the Premier in 2021 outlining this issue, offering to help him govern differently, and she got no productive response.
Okay, so you said people were sullen at the legislature today. There was a sense of anticipation. I mean, what other kinds of impacts did you see from all of this at the legislature today?
Well, the government had another bill before the House that would change the decision-making powers of education councils in the province, school boards essentially. They pulled that bill today. They put it on hold. It was heading for a vote next week. They were going to sit an extra week before adjourning to vote on that. It also was getting criticism from within the PC caucus. And so that was put on hold today. So there's a real unsettled feeling. One minister, Arlene Dunn, said, look, people in my riding are talking about the economy, jobs, housing. We need to get back on track to the issues that we talked about in our election platform.
Okay, speaking of elections and election platforms, I saw Dominic Carty, who's also a former minister in the Higgs government, suggesting there could be an election called on Monday. He said this on Twitter. Do you think that's where this is going? Do you think that Blaine Higgs might pull the plug on this and try to go to the polls?
Well, here's a couple of reasons why it makes sense. One is that now there's talk of a leadership review within the PC party, and that's a long process, but one way to short circuit it would be to go to the polls. The other thing is a bill passed the legislature today that cleans up a little loophole in our fixed date election law, a loophole that the court said could theoretically allow for a legal challenge to an early election. So that concern, that legal problem is gone. That's just a coincidence of timing, but it's not inconceivable. The Premier wouldn't answer the question directly today, but it would be quite a thing. I mean, none of the parties are ready, no candidates, no platforms, no buses, no anything. So it would be quite a stunning move.
Okay, well, you know what? We've seen a lot of stunning moves in New Brunswick these past 2 days, so who knows? Jacques Poitras in Fredericton, thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Happy to help.
Okay, as we just discussed, just moments after the New Brunswick legislature voted in favor of a Liberal opposition motion on LGBTQ plus students in provincial schools, Dorothy Shephard sent this resignation letter to Premier Higgs. It's handwritten, saying, "I can no longer remain in your cabinet." For more on this story, Dorothy Shephard joins me now. Ms. Shephard, it's good to meet you.
Thank you. Nice to meet you too.
So this has been quite the week for you in your political career. How did you reach this breaking point to resign from cabinet?
Well, I think it's been a long time coming. I have certainly, voiced my concerns about some of our government's approaches to certain topics, and this policy 713 and the debate that ensued in the House really kind of was my last straw. And I just decided that it was time. I didn't feel I could accomplish anything more in this cabinet with this premier, and thought it was time to make the move.
You're the third person, the third minister to resign from Blaine Higgs' cabinet. What kind of message are you hoping to send by resigning?
Well, everyone has a different style of management and leadership, and I've made it very clear at times with my premier that I felt that his leadership style was difficult, and that I was certainly willing to help and do whatever I could to assist with our caucus and our cabinet. He is never interested in that. He doesn't form relationships easily, and relationships for me are very important in the work that I do. So look, we've accomplished a lot of really good things together. But I really felt that I couldn't accomplish anything more.
Difficult can mean a lot of things to different people. What do you mean when you say Premier Higgs' leadership style was difficult?
Well, many sensitive subjects were handled and are being handled very antagonistically. I'm not afraid of tough conversations. We've had a lot in my 5 years in government. And I think that tough conversations can certainly be had. But I think that respect is very, very important on both sides of a conversation, and sensitivity and empathy. And I just have found that especially in the last couple of years, we've been lacking some of those qualities.
How widespread do you think this is in caucus and in cabinet? We've seen people voting against the government with some regularity over the past little while. I mean, is Premier Higgs in danger of losing his job? Do you think he's fit to stay on as premier and leader of your party?
Well, I think all of us need to consider how we're going to leave our past and our accomplishments for the next leaders of the day. And I do believe that we all have a bit of an expiration date. And I would hope that when things are struggling from compatibility, perspective, and with having concerns of being able to get things across the finish line, and bringing all of your caucus along with you, I think when those things start to fade, that there should be a consideration of what the next steps will be. And I certainly would always rather see those things happening amicably. And I always want, as a leader, to empower those who are coming behind me. And I'm not sure if Premier Higgs is ready to do that. That's completely his decision. But I do think that in light of everything that's been happening, I would hope he's considering that perhaps it's time for him to empower the people behind him.
Do you think the people behind him and his cabinet and his confidence have the cabinet and his caucus, have the confidence in him to stay on and finish out his term?
I can't speak for my colleagues. I can tell you that we certainly had a number of cabinet ministers and colleagues willing to stand against a government, work against a government motion or bill. Should I? Yeah. I can say that that he's had a lot of resistance
Mm.
to to things that have been happening in the House, and he has not been supported. And I think that sends a big message.
Okay, you've quit cabinet, but you haven't quit caucus, correct? You're still a member of Blaine Higgs caucus?
But that's correct. And I have family, I have caucus family, and and colleagues there, and I believe I can still contribute. We are still friends. I was received very well today, and so I intend to stay in caucus because that's where I can have the greatest impact.
Even if his leadership is as bad as you describe, it seems to me that if the Premier's leadership is as bad as you say, leaving caucus would be an obvious move. So why not leave caucus as well?
Well, again, I think that I can have greater input in caucus. I've stayed in cabinet a long time, at times when I didn't think I could stay. I've been able to accomplish things. And right now, I think the Premier is at a point where he's going to be making some decisions. And so I have the opportunity to see what those decisions are going to be. Leaving caucus is always an option, but it's not my first option. I want to work with my colleagues, I want to support them, and I want to contribute.
But presumably you would have had a greater access and greater input in cabinet, right? I mean, if his leadership style is as disrespectful and he lacks empathy as you describe and doesn't listen, I mean, how do you hope to possibly influence him as a backbencher now as opposed to a front bench minister?
Well, you don't just necessarily influence the Premier, you influence your colleagues as well. And I think that this week, my colleagues and I demonstrated that together we can make some huge steps. And so I believe that that unity is important, and hopefully we can maintain it. And if not, then I'll be given, I'll take my own personal options and make decisions.
So what do you do if Blaine Higgs persists, stays on as leader, and does not call an election, even though there's some speculation that maybe he calls an election on Monday, which a lot of people see as far-fetched? What do you do if he continues status quo?
I know that the party is mobilizing to consider a leadership review. I'm sure that weighs on his mind. Caucus can certainly take measures if they so choose. For me, I am very used to dealing with difficult personalities, and I will continue to do the work I need to do. We're on summer break. Caucus won't happen that much. My constituency is very important to me. I have lots of work to do for them. And so I'm very used to putting my head down and doing a job, and I'm going to continue to do that.
Just as a final point, I know you say you don't want to speak for caucus, but what's your sense of how widespread the sentiments you've expressed are in the caucus? Is it more than half? Is it 2/3? Is it 1/3? How much of his caucus is unhappy in your view?
Well, I believe the Premier and I would disagree with this, but I believe it's several members. I think several have already shown that that they're not happy with the leadership at this time and style, and that we want to voice that and take whatever power we have to convey that. And that's what happened this week. I can't tell you if it's 50% plus one. Only a vote would tell that. I can tell you that I believe it's disappointing that the Premier doesn't see that there are many who are angst about this, and really not doing much to attempt to try to resolve it.
Do you think he might kick you out for what you're saying here and what you said to other people?
Well, he doesn't have the power to do that. He would have to have caucus vote to put me out, and he would have a great deal of influence in that. And if he chooses to do that, I can't change it. But know that that's what he'll have to do unless I really feel that the situation is not worth being in.